Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. So glad you're here. As I've mentioned before, you have a choice of what podcast to be listening to, and so glad you're listening to this one today. We bring a message through people's stories and through their wisdom and their just way of being and living spiritually, hopefully encourage you on your spiritual path. This is a 501c3 nonprofit, so if you choose to donate, that would be really helpful because it's the only thing that kind of keeps us going and allows this podcast to be on the air. So thank you for all who've donated in the past and who will donate in the future. And I think that's about all I have to say today. Who wants a long run-up? Let me introduce today's guest. Shawn Murphy started his spiritual journey at the age of 14 after leaving the Catholic Church. His search for a logical explanation of Christianity took him on a journey through history, philosophy, and 18 different religions. As an engineer and entrepreneur, his curiosity has led his search for a logical explanation of the spiritual world and the original teachings of all of the prophets and Jesus. He's published 4 books and numerous papers on religion and spirituality. He's a prolific writer on Quora with over 6.6 million views and the creator of 3 spaces there: the spiritual world, early Christian wisdom, and torn between 2 worlds. Welcome, Shawn.
It's a pleasure to be here today and talk to you about my life's journey, and hopefully it can be inspiring for others to, dig for the truth and look for something that makes sense to you.
I love that about you. I think that asking questions and not just taking everything on face value and digging into your beliefs is the journey that we're on. We've been so conditioned for so long with so many tales and so many myths, and not that all of them are false, but to ask the questions and dig into it, you're a real role model for that. So thank you for being with here
Appreciate
today
that.
with me. And so let's start by giving you the opportunity to kind of briefly tell your story, your journey, particularly as you're going through 18 different religions. I know as a unity minister, I led a church for like 10 or 12 years. Many former Catholics come to my church. I'm very familiar with people who've left Catholicism. But yours is really interesting because you went through a journey through history, philosophy, and 18 different religions. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you very much. In our household, growing up in a Catholic environment, my father was a deacon and his brother was a priest. It was hard to get away from the religion. So, I, we were expected to go to church every Sunday. And at the age of 14, I had been to the Catholic Church enough, and just, it didn't make any sense to me. I'm an engineer, I'm a very logical thinker, and have been since a young child. And so I went to church every Sunday. I went to different churches. I went to the Baptist church, I went to the Methodist church, I went to the Buddhist temple, I went to Hindu temples, and by the time I got out of college, I had visited all these different places. I went to the Far East, and I really fell in love with Buddhism. This concept of just becoming better, and until we become so good that we don't need to come back here to Earth. And from the view of looking at humanity, the difference between peoples around the world, there's no way that in one lifetime we can achieve perfection, which Jesus demands of us. People read the Sermon on the Mount and they forget what he actually says. He says we have to become perfect as God is perfect. So many Christians think just believing in Jesus will make you perfect, but that's not the case. And the Buddhists, I think, had it right, is that it takes a lot of work to become perfect. And, that's what I rediscovered in the Ionian Greeks. The Ionian Greeks are the ones that modern science have always gone back to figure out where we went wrong. It's where Galileo went when he was looking at the stars, looking at the sun and saying, well, the earth isn't the center of the universe, as Rome was teaching. He went back to Euclid, he went back to Archimedes, to Pythagoras, and he rediscovered what science was in the beginning. But what intrigued me most about this group, this society back then, is that they created theories, 2,500 years ago that are still valid today. And when you think about, in my lifetime, I'm not that old, but how many theories have been overturned in my lifetime in science, right? But these guys had a different view of the universe, and digging into who they really were and what they really were. They were healers, they were musicians, doctors, philosophers, and scientists. Erwin Schrödinger, when he saw what happened at the dawn of quantum mechanics, he said, how could we be so stupid? Speaking of scientists, how did we not see this coming? And he went back to Archimedes, to Democritus, and he rediscovered the holistic view that they had. And when you look at God's creation in a holistic viewpoint, you can start to maybe discover what are the spiritual laws that are behind these physical laws in his creation. Because he's not chaotic, we know that. His creation isn't chaotic. It's beautiful in its whole self. And that's what they taught. And the spiritual laws that they taught, and I go back to Socrates, who's the father of logic. But if you read his work, you'll see that he talks more about the gods than he does about logic. And it's really, really quite amazing. But that's what allowed their theories to be timeless, because they understood the spiritual laws that create the material laws. And that's where the first Christians came from. They were Greeks, if you remember.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were all Greeks. And they were all waiting for the coming of Jesus, the coming of the Logos. The Jews weren't waiting for them. They're still waiting for him. But the Greeks were waiting. And that's where Paul went to teach the Greeks. And they were the first scientifically based, logically based theologians. And Origen of Alexandria was, the best of these early theologians, who had the logic of Plato, who understood the holistic viewpoint.
So let me just ask you quickly, when you say holistic viewpoint, are you talking about like mind, body, spirit, or something else?
More than that.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, all of the physical laws in this world, this universe that we live in, came through a creation that has other laws that govern it. And understanding holistically what the material world, how it works, how the spiritual world works.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just mind, body, and spirit. It includes all of science.
Mm-hmm. And actually, when I say that, I mean body is the material. So like the material and the spiritual as all together. material, spiritual, and what else? Anything else?
No, it's just that I'm trying to bring it down to laws.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And because my experience has been talking to a lot of spiritual type of people, psychics and so forth, and also the church, they talk about magic when it comes, and mystery when it comes to the spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Ionian Greeks talked about were the laws of the spiritual world, not chaos, not magical,
Mm-hmm.
but laws, which Jesus talked about. I mean, Jesus told us we have to repay our debts to the last farthing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He said, when we give love, we receive more love in return. And John Nash got the Nobel Prize for proving that. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So you're talking about like the scientific laws and the spiritual laws are like the same.
Well, they're not the same. They're consistent. I'll just put it that
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah.
Not the same, but they're consistent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think before we go on, I think when you talked about was it Schrödinger who said how do we not see?
Yeah.
I think that question is so interesting. Don't you think that is a question that is always going to be asked about every age?
Well, it is.
Yeah, I mean, so many things that are obvious to us now weren't obvious to people in former years, and so many things that we take for granted as being, in the future, people will look and go, "How did they not see? How did they not see that?" I think it's an interesting mind to have is how do we not see? So, so that so you can keep talking about that if you want, but I do want to get into the rhetoric and wisdom and how all of that came out, or your book on that, your thoughts on that came out of this.
Well, that was the most difficult one for me to write, because, and I think it's the most difficult one for all of us to deal with, is how do we determine what is true wisdom when somebody is speaking, and what is a mixture of truth and lie, which is rhetoric. It's something that has a motive behind it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's really quite difficult. The Socrates spent the end of his life trying to make that point through the Socratic method of just questioning, trying to keep questioning, well, what's behind what you're trying to say. And, trying to discover what is true wisdom, it is a lot of work. And, I was at a philosophy conference. I was invited to Liverpool to present my paper on Origen. And that's really where it hit me about this problem, because all these philosophers had come together to talk about, basically the ancient philosophers. And I was talking to these grad students, PhD students, and they came up to me and they said, "You really believe what you're studying. I wish I could do that."
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, it's interesting, but what I found is that people use Aristotle and Plato in the same sentence,
Mm-hmm.
and Socrates in the same sentence, and those are the ones that I talk about in my book, is because Socrates created the Socratic method, and Plato documented it. He documented the dialogue, which is what I try to do on Quora, is that when people ask questions, I like to keep the dialogue there so that other people can read the dialogue and make up their own mind. And that's what Plato was able to do.
Rather than answer the question, is what you're
Yes.
saying. Yeah. So I go on Quora, ask a spiritual question or something, and you would create a dialogue so that I engage with you,
Yeah.
but I don't get handed the answer by you.
I usually just put out hints and help
Uh-huh.
people to find the answer themselves. Yes. But what the point I was trying to make with the difference between Plato and Aristotle is that Aristotle used what he learned in Plato's school to, go help a conqueror, essentially. If he was as good as Plato, he should have taken over as the head of the academy when Plato died, but he didn't. And it wasn't until the Catholic Church or the Roman Church was looking for a explanation for their theory that the earth was the center of the universe
Mm.
that they found Aristotle.
Mm.
None of his contemporaries read him. It was only 700 years later that the church had grabbed him because he explained that, I mean, if you explain his physics, heavy things are on the ground, light things are in the air. So everything that's up above us is lighter than what's on the ground because that's why it's above us.
So they found the guy that gave them the answer that they wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens today too.
Yes. Um,
Let's hire that scientist.
but my point is he didn't even understand the basic laws of physics that was taught in Plato's academy.
Mm-hmm.
That was taught by Archimedes, by Democritus, by Euclid. He didn't even grasp the material laws. And then he was speculating on what the spiritual laws were. And then it's pure speculation.
Okay. So then where does Socrates and Origen fit into all of that?
Um, Socrates was, in my view, one of the unrecognized prophets. Okay. He prepared the Greeks for the coming of Jesus. They spoke about the different qualities of Jesus, the eros, the love of God, the logos, the word of God. But they were talking about Jesus. And it's interesting if you read the symposium, the discussion around the table that was going on of them explaining what eros is, you can see how the different segments of society saw what true love really is. And it was only the Ionian Greeks who could really put into words what true love was. The Spartans, of course, true love was the love of young boys.
Mm-hmm.
That for them is true love. And that's reflected in today's society too.
For sure. Yeah. But in terms of a timeline, where is Socrates in relation to Plato and Aristotle?
Well, Socrates died in 399 BC.
Okay. So that was well before Jesus's time.
Well, yeah, it
Yeah.
was well before
Yeah.
Jesus' time. And then, Jesus told his disciples that what I have to say to you, you cannot bear. So I will send the Spirit of truth to teach you all you need to know. It's John 16, abbreviated a little bit. But think about that. Jesus was telling his closest disciples that what he had to tell them, they could not bear it. And that one sentence really opened up a door for me. What is it that he wanted to say, but they couldn't bear it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Origen taught, what we couldn't bear.
Okay. So
Okay.
let's go there. Origen lived when?
185 to 254 AD.
Yeah, so he had access to
He had
whatever
access.
sacred texts or scriptures or were going on at that time. This is before the Council of Nicaea,
Yeah.
but there was a whole lot of writings and a whole lot of storytelling, and the Christian religion was fairly young at that time.
Yes, and the first thing that he did is something that's never been repeated. He took the major Old Testaments of the time, and the 5 major Old Testaments, the Aramaic, the Hebrew, and the Greeks, and he laid them out phrase by phrase, side by side. Think about doing that. I did that as an engineer, stripping out stuff and trying to, but 5 Old Testaments, he stripped them out and laid them out side by side. And he was one of the few Christian scholars who spoke Aramaic, he spoke Hebrew, and he spoke Greek. Okay. The work is called the Hexapla. And through that, he saw the omissions that the priests and the scribes brought into the various versions. And he found things that were added.
Mm-hmm.
But after doing that work, he then started commentating on all of the Gospels. The peak of his work was he wrote 32 books on the Gospel of John.
And you know, at that time, how many gospels were there? I mean, we know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the ones that were agreed to be considered, the gospels. Were those the only ones he was looking at? And I don't mean to minimize it. I know it's a lot of work. I'm just saying, or was he looking at other books as well, or other
Well,
texts?
he looked at everything. I mean, he published over 6,000 works.
It's amazing.
And that's why I say, he fulfilled Jesus's promise, because he did explain everything. And even he was declared a heretic in 543 by the Emperor Justinian. But even today, people say that no new concept was brought into Christianity after Origen.
Okay, so
He examined every concept.
this is an amazing body of work. So it's like he took what was written, which wasn't, I don't know, he wrote more about it than was written. I mean, obviously.
Much more.
Yeah, he took what was written and then kind of expanded it and analyzed it and looked at the omissions, looked at the additions, did he discern for himself what was true and not true in his writings?
Well,
Or did he add doctrine?
if you read some of his original writings, which still exist, most of what he wrote was destroyed. Much of it was transcribed into Latin, and then corrected to meet the doctrine of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some pieces that come to us in his own hand. And for instance, he would say in this case, the usage of this word, well, this word is used in 3 different ways in the text. In this case, we have to use this usage because it's the only one that fits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the kind of analysis that he does throughout his work. He says that this can't be a material or a literal interpretation because Jesus didn't go up the hill because it's physically actually down a hill. If you walk where he went, it's down a hill, but they say Jesus went up.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be like a metaphysical
Yeah.
interpretation. He would say,
Yes.
if it said up the hill, it meant he was like rising in consciousness or
Yeah.
awareness or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I mean, culturally, we look at the writings in the Bible and we have this really flat way of looking at it with our English,
Yes.
which is a completely different language than Aramaic and Hebrew. And then we don't have any nuances. We have no sense of what's symbolic versus what's literal. So we just assume it's all literal, or it's all symbolic, or it's all trash. It seems like those are the 3 things that people kind of assume.
Or they just use it to support their views.
Yes. Or they cherry pick and
Yes.
pick that, and I like the way this word sounds here, and yeah, right. So wow. So he was kind of like the truth teller about what was actually the writings were really about.
Yes.
And
And what he did, which was unusual. I mean, for him, there were no contradictions. He wrote a reconciliation between Judaism and Christianity. He wrote a reconciliation between Platonism and Christianity. Okay.
okay.
And you saw how from his work in the Old Testament and the New Testament, he reconciled those belief systems into Christianity. So
Okay.
logic should be in Christianity, and Judaism, the true beliefs in Judaism should be in Christianity. And so for him, there were no contradictions, there was no conflict.
Yeah, so he was like a bridge. He bridged things, or he saw the
He bridged
patterns
things, yes.
that were overall encompassing versus looking for this analytical mind that wants to piece things apart and and say that applies, that doesn't apply. He saw it all as kind of consistent.
Yeah, and as I said that when I was 14. I said, if there's a God who made this, I should be able to understand that.
If it was the guy
Talking
who made
about
your brain, yeah,
if he made my brain,
yeah,
I should be able to understand his religion.
right, right. So that was your realization at 14,
Yeah.
and that's what caused you to leave the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Okay, because what you saw in the Catholic Church as a 14-year-old
It just didn't
didn't
make
have the
sense.
logic. Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't make sense. Can you point to some things that didn't make sense to you?
I mean, the biggest thing to me that didn't make sense is, a binary choice of heaven and hell. And that's never made sense.
That at the end of this life,
Yeah.
we either go to heaven or we get the eject button
Yeah. Yeah.
and go burn and go burn. I think that's a problem for I think it's a problem for most um, thinking minds, most delicate minds, most empathetic people. it's like there's an eject button, and half of us are
Yes.
going somewhere bad. Yeah. Okay, so that was your big, that was kind of your big question mark. That was your kind of
Well, that was
this
the
God
biggest
doesn't
thing.
make sense,
Yeah.
or God must make sense, and so this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because when you look at his creation as a whole, there's nothing that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You look at
Mm-hmm.
nature,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing that doesn't make sense. Um, And that's what came out in Liverpool, is that for Socrates and the philosophers in the Academy of Plato, the only way you became a philosopher was you first had to study mathematics and geometry to discover logic. Then you had to study the natural sciences to understand how the nature works. And then you were ready to start looking at the spiritual world and about wisdom and about philosophy. And today, somebody who does a doctorate in in philosophy hasn't done that.
I think that's such an interesting stacking. We either separate all those out. What was the first one? Material?
Math and
Mathematics. I read that. Yeah, I couldn't read my own
mathematics.
writing. Mathematics, natural laws, and then the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So it's like first mathematics, okay, then natural laws, and then you're ready
Yes, then you're
to
ready.
go into the spiritual. That is not how we look at it.
No, it isn't. It
No.
isn't. But you understand, if God created this world that we
Yes.
live in, that gives us hints about him,
Yeah.
right? And that's where you start. Once
Yeah.
you understand how his world that he created works, then you can start thinking about him.
Yeah, I completely get that. And I like the beginning with mathematics, because I think mathematics, I mean, I'm an engineer as well, and I love mathematics because it's so clear and so reliable, and it's unchanging. And I
Mhm.
think God is unchanging. There's not this fickleness to mathematics.
Yeah.
It's not like the equation sometimes equals 4 and sometimes it equals 25, or it is something you can rely on. It's beautiful, and it's logical, and it has to be, in my mind, also how God is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we know you can count on two hands the number of physical laws that are in the world, right? And they're all beautiful. They're simple. They're beautiful, right?
Hmm.
And so that tells you something. It's a place to start.
Hmm.
And that's what I like, the way Einstein said it. He wasn't comfortable with what Niels Bohr came up with for quantum mechanics. He couldn't figure out the elegant solution, the beautiful solution, right? So he kept his mouth shut, but he knew it was wrong, but he didn't know it was right,
Hmm.
because it wasn't elegant as it should be.
Well, that's a really interesting way of describing the spiritual journey, because, like, when you're 14, you knew what wasn't right. You knew something wasn't right, or something was wrong. We live in this beautiful, elegant universe. It's logical, it's beautiful, there's order to it. And then there's this spiritual idea that comes at you, and it's like, that just doesn't make sense. And then, but you don't have to know what is correct to go on the journey. The
Yes.
journey is to find that. The journey is to find what makes sense. And I think that's where people stop, because it's like, well, I don't know what makes sense. So yeah, this I'll go ahead and accept this, so they don't go on the journey to find truth. And they find themselves stuck probably in rhetoric.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Um, it's so interesting. I didn't have the same realization like you did when you were 14, because I didn't grow up in the church. I grew up with pretty non-religious background. But I remember when I was like 9, I remember I was traveling with my family through, I think, Tijuana. We lived in California, and through
Mhm.
through Baja California, and I remember seeing people who lived in these very different conditions than I lived in. I didn't live in lavish conditions, but I lived in in a nice home in Northern California. And these people lived in houses made of boxes and Coke bottles and things that I hadn't seen before. And I remember as a 9-year-old going, okay, life has to make sense. Like, this doesn't make sense to me that I'm living where I'm living and they're living where they're living. I was kind of judging it because it's conceivable that they were as happy or more happy than I, but I was judging the conditions. And I said, there has to be some way that this universe is, or this world, I didn't know about the universe at the time, is designed so that there is some fairness to it. There's some opportunity for each of us.
Yep.
And so in my own little mind, I kind of made up the idea of reincarnation, not having heard about it. Now, I'm not taking credit for it. I'm not saying that I am the origin of that, but I'm saying my mind was looking for something that would make sense out of this. And so I thought to my little 9-year-old mind, well, maybe we have different lives, and maybe, I'm here doing this time, and they're doing this time, and maybe we'll switch places in another. Anyway, that's just my own story of seeking logic when I had already decided that the world was beautiful and that there was something to God being order. And when I saw disorder, there had to be some sense out of it. So that was my little journey.
Well, it's how I ended up when I came out of college, because I said I discovered Buddhism, and it really felt good. It
Yes.
felt right,
Yes.
because we're all on this path, this journey. Some have just started the journey. Some are finishing the journey. But we're all going the same direction,
Yes.
right? And we're, what somebody behind me is going through, I went through it too, right? And I
And
can
there's
have
somebody
empathy.
ahead.
I can have empathy for them
Yeah.
instead of look down on it. I have empathy for them because it's a long journey, and that's what Origen taught, is a long, slow reconciliation with God.
And that's what you think that Jesus didn't feel comfortable talking to his disciples
No,
about.
what Jesus didn't feel comfortable about telling his disciples is why the reconciliation was needed.
Okay. Do you want should we go into that, or should we go into the doctrine of salvation, or is it the same thing?
Well, it's the same thing.
Okay.
I mean, why do we need to be saved? What are we saved from?
Yeah, and what is saved?
Yes. So the what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount is that we need to become perfect as God is perfect. And perfection takes time. But yet, God created us in his image. God is ethereal, he's immortal, and he's perfect. How are we in his image? We're mortal, we're corrupt, and we're material. So what if God created us immortal, perfect, or divine, and ethereal? Maybe that's what we need to get back to.
Mm-hmm.
So the one of the problems of Aramaic is it has no future tense. And a big problem of Revelations is it has no timeline in it.
Mm-hmm.
And most people think Revelations is a prophecy. But I like to compare it to Jesus putting John down in front of the History Channel and showing him the history of heaven. And so when we talk about the fall of a third of the stars of heaven in Revelations 12, when did that happen? When did a third of heaven fall?
And heaven, how do you define heaven?
Well, in Revelation, it says a great battle occurred in heaven, and the great dragon was cast out, and he took a third of the stars of heaven with him. Heaven is I mean, God is a spiritual being. Heaven is in a spiritual place.
It's the spiritual realm.
Yes.
Okay.
So when was 1/3 of heaven cast out?
So this is the story of how we got where we are now.
That's what Jesus knew his disciples couldn't bear.
Okay.
And that's what most Christians today can't bear, that we fell from heaven. We didn't.
But they do follow generally the Old Testament and Eden and the kind of the fall from grace.
Yes, but it's an inherited grace, or an inherited sin from Adam and Eve. It's not we did it.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
this is this what we're talking about? Is this the doctrine of salvation? Or is this
Well,
just talking about, or is this just talking about Revelation?
no, well, this is talking about the restoration of all things, what Origen taught.
The restoration of all things. Okay,
Yes.
the restoration of all things. So he talks about how, like, there was a state where we all, were all together or close to God, and
Yep.
whatever that was, and that we all fell away. I was reading about this yesterday. We all fell away in different kind of levels, and
Yes.
the angels were closer, and then the humans were further away, and then the Christ is real close to God. Is that true? Yeah, kind of have that.
Well, there are no humans in heaven.
Okay, but the souls that ended up incarnating here in the physical
Yes,
are
they came from
are
heaven.
the furthest the furthest we fell the furthest away from the divine creator.
Well, the 1/3 of heaven. Yes, 1/3 of the
Okay.
stars of heaven
All right.
fell. Yeah.
All right. So, and what did you call this again? This is um
It's
origin
Origen's teaching of the restoration of all
the
things.
restoration of all things.
Yeah.
So the restoration of all things. That's what we wanted to get to. The restoration of all things teaches, and this is Origen's his interpretations of the Gospels, or was this just some sort of direct intuition that he received? The restoration of all things.
Well, it was well documented through the Old Testament and through the New Testament of
Okay.
this restoration. Yes.
Okay, so traditional Christianity teaches that if we have faith, if we believe, then we go to heaven. If we don't, we go to hell. Something like that. That's simple. The restoration of all things is different, and it shows that we all fell away from the
Yeah.
one creator, and then we're all on the path back
Yes.
to that. It's kind of like the prodigal son story. We're all on the path
Yes.
back to the
Yeah.
divine creator.
The prodigal son is the leader of the revolt, who will finally come home one day.
Okay, so we're on our way home, and this is what Origen taught
Yeah.
as his interpretation of early Christianity, based on all of the sacred scripts and everything that he was interpreting,
Yeah.
and that what he was presenting as, this is what the original intended message was,
Yeah.
and then what happened, because that's not really
Well,
what ended up getting translated.
what happened
Now.
was 300 years after he died, and this is the interesting part. This is the most part that intrigues me. 300 years after he died, the Emperor of Rome, not the church, the Emperor of Rome declared him a heretic.
Oh, of course.
But 300 years dead.
Yeah. Right,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And so what did Justinian do after he declared Origen a heretic?
No, I don't know that.
You don't know that?
I do not know that.
He conquered the Arians.
Okay.
He killed them, the heretics. And those were the early Christians. Those were the God-loving, peaceful early Christians who believed in the restoration of all things.
Okay, so he wiped out the people who carried this message.
Yes. And
Okay.
what and
Well, we've
what
seen that in
followed and what
history.
followed that?
Well, I don't know, but
It
I'm guessing that things like the
starts with
Crusades
dark.
and stuff.
Starts with dark.
Oh, the Dark Ages.
He put out the light,
I get that. Yeah.
and then
So
came the darkness.
when this happens, this has happened in history. This is happening today. It's like if you have a wonderful message, it's like if it's not the narrative, you're dead. You know, you're
Yeah.
gone. So that's what happened then. And this is what's so interesting about how did Christianity become what Christianity is, or any religion, but Christianity's roots are so interesting, or the history is so interesting, because there's kind of this all these different writings, and there's kind of a competition for what's going to kind of reach the the level of being looked at. And then you've got Origen, who's got it all out there, and he's kind of figured it all out with his message. Then you've got Constantine and his Council of Nicaea saying that's in, that's out, that's in,
Yeah.
that's out, and then you have things coming up like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Nag Hammadi, and like, well, put those away.
Yeah.
So you've got these governing bodies, these powerful people who are deciding what it is. In
Yeah.
the meantime, it's your interpretation or your belief that Origen is like the authority on early Christian teaching.
Well, he was in what I say is he fulfilled that promise that Jesus had.
And he was speaking wisdom.
Yes, he came and explained all the truth. John 16:2-3. Okay, that's Jesus's promise. Now, 300 years after he died, they started destroying everything that he did.
And so, but so then my question then is, how do we know his truth is truth, the truth? And I think the answer would be that it is logical, and that
No, there's a
no.
different answer to
Okay, what's the answer?
it. What did Jesus promise? He promised, my word will never die.
Okay.
So Justinian destroyed his word. Do you think he's sitting by idly? He's sent other spirits of truth to teach his word.
Well, I get that. I'm trying to think about discernment. Like, so, we have talked about rhetoric versus wisdom, and how
Yes.
do we discern what is rhetoric and what is wisdom? And so we're saying that Origen was wisdom, that he had the truth. But how do we know that? How do we discern that what he said was the truth, whereas this person over here is saying that? And how do we discern that that's not the truth?
Well, it's a hard thing to answer without seeing his entire body of work. We only have fragments of his work, and we know what people said about him who lived around him, right? We know what his enemies said about him. We know what his followers said about him. But we can't go and prove that everything he wrote was wisdom, because it's not there. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm suggesting is that if you read what came out of his hand, in other words, his original writings, not the ones that were rewritten after he died, you see true wisdom in his words. I mean,
So it's like when you see it, you know it.
it's just, and you see it's logical. As I said, it's laid out very, very, very logical of how the message goes from Genesis 1 to Revelations. It's the same message all the way through.
Okay. Well, and I think the restoration of all things, which if I understand it correctly, it says that we all are get saved, or that there's salvation. And how do we define salvation? Because that's kind of a tricky word. It's a word that people are triggered by. So I think it's a returning to the
To the
creator
divine.
source.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
divine. Yeah, it's not like being good or bad, or but so we all, and this does make sense to me, that we all return, we all come home. We can't, because Jesus also said, we got to go look for the lost sheep. And wasn't like it's okay if, like, my boy, I'm gonna escape the laws of karma, and I'm not coming back this time. Good for me. That's not the end. It's like, even if that was the case, we all are in process to return
Yeah.
home. And that does completely 100% align a with love,
Oh, yes.
mercy, with wisdom, with all of what I would call, attributes that I would put onto God, the creator, the source. That this idea that, yeah, if you're born a Hindu, too bad. Or if you sinned and you didn't repent on your deathbed, too bad. Those are things that don't really jive with an ordered universe and a loving creator presence underneath all that
It,
is.
it's what you said about your trip down south is, if God is a good God, then everybody should have the same chances that I have.
Yes.
And that's what you were thinking as a
Right.
child.
Exactly.
Everybody should
Yes.
have the same chances that I have, right?
Right.
And that's what the restoration is about. The only way for us to get back is through Jesus. But that doesn't mean we can't make a long distance on the path, regaining our virtues, regaining our love without Jesus. We can do it as a Hindu, we can do it as a Buddhist, we can do it as a Muslim. But to finally get back at the end, we need to go through Jesus.
Okay. And for me, I have a similar belief, but it's a little different, because I think it's like the I am, rather than the person of Jesus, but it's the Christ consciousness, the I am consciousness, that's the door. And then when he said, I am the door, it's like, the I am consciousness is the door, or the Christ consciousness is the door. For me, there are many paths up the mountain. There may be many mountains, but there is one door.
Yeah, there's one door. But as I said, as you said, if you were born as a Hindu, you can work on perfection being Hindu.
Sure. Yeah.
But you can't get through the door until you are born into Christianity and learn about Christ, and then you can get through the door.
Okay. All right.
Right?
I think I have a little different view, but similar, because I don't think it's about Christianity as much as it is about the Christ. I guess
Well, I
it's a
say
semantics thing, I think.
no. I agree 100% with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
slipped
think
a
it's just
word.
semantics. Yeah. We get tied up with words. We get tied up with, in the meantime, then. So they destroy all of Origen's cool writings. They declare him a heretic. We got hurled into the
Dark.
Dark Ages, and we are on this path of rhetoric, on this path of I love what you said in the beginning. I think I wrote it down, that there's a motive behind rhetoric. And I think wisdom just kind of is. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not trying to teach. It's not trying to convert you to
Yes.
anything. Wisdom is just sitting there in its own beauty, And if you recognize it, then you're like, oh, I behold this wisdom.
Yeah.
And you don't feel any kind of coercion or any kind of like propaganda or persuasion. Whereas rhetoric, which is so much of what's took over religion, governments, institutions,
Yeah.
all of the media narratives, everything that we live in has this kind of motive behind it, which is, kind of like, come with me, or this is the right thing, or you're going to get this if that, or if you don't that, this is going to happen. And so there's like a coercion or some sort of manipulation under rhetoric.
Yes.
Okay. And
Exactly.
so, and it surrounds us, and it probably has surrounded humanity since we fell from,
Oh, yeah.
from the creator, uh, divine presence, that we've been in this world of duality. And can you just talk a little bit about, in your book, you talk about the two trees in Genesis, the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, and you equate those to rhetoric and
Yeah.
wisdom. And I thought that was so interesting.
Well, I mean, you basically said it in your discussion there. I mean, the tree of life is there. It gives life to everybody, right? It's like the sun. It's not discriminatory. It doesn't have a motive.
Right,
It's just
right.
there, right? And it's the source of life. And if you follow that through the I am the vine, that's Jesus is the source of wisdom. Jesus is the wisdom of God, um, the love of God, and the word of God. And that's the picture of him in the garden. And then there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I hear a lot of people talk about, why can't we know about all these things? Why is God not allowing us to learn all this stuff?
Hmm.
But it's not, it's the knowledge of good and evil. And the best lie is 99% truth,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. It sure is.
And that's the best rhetoric. It's 99% truth.
Yeah, it's so enticing. It has you, because it's like it's you can't even see the 1%. That's
No,
You can't even see the
no,
1%. Right. Meanwhile, the tree of life is like pure wisdom.
it's pure. Well, it's life. It's everything we need to live.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's light. It's energy, and it doesn't discriminate.
Right. And I've always said that's a great
Everybody
definition for
receives it.
God. God does not discriminate. It's like the rain that falls doesn't fall next on you, but not the person next to you.
Yes,
So
and
in the story, when Adam and Eve in the story ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's it's a denial of life, but
well,
it's
they ate it. I mean, it's a metaphor that
sure.
they fell for the
They
rhetoric.
fell for the slyness. They fell for
They
the
fell for that.
99%. Yeah. The imitation, it's almost like it's an imitation. It's almost like uh, a copy with an error
Yes.
in it.
It's an enticing copy. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's an enticing copy. I thought that was just a really, really, really interesting way of interpreting that story in Genesis and those two trees. And so here we are in this world today, just being swallowed up and by rhetoric, and saying yes to it and continuing to be fooled by it. And like in the garden, they're fooled by the serpent. The serpent is come, come look at my rhetoric. And we're immersed in it. And I think the process of awakening out of rhetoric, out of the 99% truth, into wisdom, I think that's so much our spiritual journey. I think that honing our discernment so that we can discern between truth and falseness, wisdom and rhetoric. I think that's the biggest muscle that we have to develop.
Yeah, and it's the key is in us. in our true self is the key to understanding what is
Mhm.
wisdom and what is rhetoric. Um, and at the end of my fourth book, that's the recommendation I make to everybody, is going on a path of self discovery. Um, that's where I've learned the most in my lifetime, is on various paths of self discovery.
So would
To
you say that's
discover.
your message? Is that your, if I were to ask you, what is your message? Would that be it?
Um,
And I don't mean like I don't mean like a religious message. I mean like, a Shawn Murphy message.
not everybody can make that journey. Um, and so I can't say it's my message, but um, as a parent, I think that's where we can start, is to help to understand that each child coming into this world is a soul with a set of talents, um, might have some fate attached to it. But to discover who that soul is as a parent, and to nurture that soul to become what it should be, not a tree, but maybe a lion, uh, not force it to be something that it
Right.
isn't,
Mhm.
right? And that part of this discovery, I think, as a parent, is really needed today, has been for a long time,
To allow
to
each individual soul to discover themselves on their own path.
to become the best that they can be.
Mhm.
Okay. And by giving that gift to our daughter, letting her choose her way since she was 3 years old, um, and being behind her the whole time. She's 26 and she's never disrespected us. She loves that we gave her those chances.
Mhm.
And they weren't all great. I mean, they were failures, um, but she found her way, and we didn't tell her what that way was.
And I think maybe a corollary of that, if for people who aren't parents, is to kind of allow that for everyone,
Allow that, yeah,
because it's like I may not, I'm not your parent, you're not my parent, but I don't need to impose my will on you. And I can see you as an individual soul with your own self-discovery, and that it's my um, in my role is to allow you to unfold in your way, and from you allow me to unfold in my way, and that we're not imposing on anybody.
yeah.
But I think it's especially important with our children, for sure.
Well, yeah, I like the way you expanded it. And when you first asked me that question, I was thinking about a number of the people that I work with who, they need support where they are in order to get to the point where they can do self-discovery. Uh,
Okay.
so, I work with a lot of schizophrenics and people suffering from spiritual battles that they're going through.
Okay. That sounds like that might be another podcast.
It probably is.
I think I want to wrap this one up. We can do schizophrenia and all that at another one. But thank you for joining me, Shawn. I think you have this wealth of knowledge, and your path of self-discovery that brought you in deep into philosophy and history, taking that deep dive that so few people take, and that through your books and your Quora page that you are out there kind of, I don't know that you're spreading the message as much, but you're kind of inviting people on the journey. You're inviting people to
Yeah.
to discover for themselves, and also offering, what you know, but inviting people to discover for themselves. And I think that's just a wonderful gift to the world.
Thank you very much for having me, and your level of engagement's amazing. I really love the energy that you have today.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. I appreciate it. I talk to the most interesting people. I have the best job. It doesn't pay much, but it's fun. So thank you. And I now close the spiritual forum.
Thank you. Bye-bye.